What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I want to talk about what it means when someone says mid-tech knife or custom knife or production knife or all of those little tiny terms in between. This is something that has been argued about and talked about for a very long time in the knife world. And, amongst people who have been involved in the knife world for a long time, if you've been an enthusiast for a while, you have an idea of what it means, or maybe you know absolutely what it means. But then there's people who are new to the knife world where they hear terms like that and they hear the word custom or mid, and it's confusing. And oftentimes, especially if you're buying from the secondary market, it really can kind of throw you for a loop as far as what you might be buying from this person on the forums. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit and kind of help people understand. The very first thing I'm going to do within the first minute is I'm going to let you guys know that the term midtech has actually been defined 100% by Ken Onion. Ken Onion actually invented the term. This is a midtech, and the definition of midtech is actually not up for debate. I know a lot of people like to kind of define it in their own way. It's not. I'm going to put a link in the description of the original Blade Forums thread where somebody asked back in 2004, what does midtech mean? And Ken Onion himself actually chimed in. You just basically follow the link, scroll down to where Ken Onion talks. He says, basically I had a model that was really, really popular, and I wanted to, I considered discontinuing it, but it was too popular, and I didn't want to do that, but it was just too much work making all the parts myself. So essentially what I did is I had all the pieces cut for me, and then I did all the grinding and finishing myself. But to keep people from thinking that that's how all his knives were made, basically to keep people from thinking, well, he's having a lot of these parts machine cut, they can't be worth nearly as much as, what he's asking for them, which would be his custom pieces. He coined the term mid-tech, which is a specific definition of that particular group of knives, meaning some of the parts were pre-cut, but he did all the final finishing and things. So it's above a production level, meaning, a production knife would be something like the Spyderco Manix 2, that's everything is made by machine and then it's assembled. He customized, or he custom finished or hand finished some of the parts, and then everything else was pieced together. If you want more of that in detail, simply follow the link in the description to the Blade Forums thread, and you can read that for yourself. But basically, that's to keep people from flaming up and getting upset and wanting to define mid-tech for them. You can't. It's been defined. Ken Onion actually came up with that phrase, so you can read about that. But I want to give you guys some examples of knives that are, either classified as production or mid-tech or custom, and kind of where the line gets foggy for everybody, despite there being a definition. Because once you get between mid-tech and custom, it really gets foggy. It really gets kind of, it gets frustrating for a lot of people. So the reason the Manix 2 is out front today is because this is customized. It is a customized production knife. And for new people looking on the forums, even though that it actually does explain this in Blade Forums on one of the stickies or whatever you call that. There's a category for custom knives that are for sale, and just regular knives that are for sale. And they say a regular knife that has been customized does not make it a custom knife. For example, this PM2 did not come stock like this. I ordered these scales and I ordered the Flytanium cage, and then I installed them. That does not make this a custom knife. It makes it a customized version of a production knife. Now, also keep in mind, as I classify these things, I don't want anybody to get the impression that I am saying that custom knives or mid-tech knives are better than production knives. They just have, basically, there's different amounts of human interaction that go into them. I will, however, start off with the lowest of the low in terms of production knife, or what I call tier 0. What we have to represent this first category, the meaningless category of production, is the Smith & Wesson Extreme Ops Rescue Black Tanto, whatever, who cares. I hate this knife. This is a junk knife. I'm sorry if you disagree with me. I actually have 2 videos on this knife explaining exactly why I don't like it and exactly what it is and why I think it's unsafe. Anyways, it's representing the lowest tier of production, or tier 0. By the way, in my opinion, there are 3 tiers of production. Tier 1 of production would be what I would put the Ontario Rat 1 in. This is an excellent knife. It's kind of where good knives start, in my opinion. These knives are all made by machine. They're not made in the United States, but that doesn't necessarily make Tier 1 exclusive to, not USA made knives. It just happens to be that the Rat 1 is, a recognizable knife. Made with good steel, made with good, fit and finish, good materials all the way around. Low cost though, low manufacturing costs. You get what you pay for in all these categories, absolutely. Tier 2 is what I would put a knife like the Spyderco Shaman in. That's going to be, in this case, this is a USA production knife. Really good fit and finish. You're actually, in this case, getting a higher quality steel, CPM S30V, G10, really excellent all the way around. This is a more premium category of production knife. I would also place the Man X2 in there, and the higher end of Tier 2, I would also place knives like the Zero Tolerance 0393. Your Benchmades would also go in this class. And there's a lot of really nice foreign-made knives that also go in this classification too, like your Kaisers, a lot of your Bestecs, your Wee knives, these are all right about there. At the very tippy top of that, Tier 2, depending on how you guys view how I'm discussing this, your Microtech production knives. Now, the problem is that some of Microtech's production knives can range, anywhere from, in this case, $280 or even less, I think. $200, all the way up to like $600 or $700 on the Microtech Halo 6. So you might classify some of those as ultra high end or your Tier 3s. And a good example of something I would consider Tier 3 is like the Todd Begg Steelcraft series, 3/4 Quaken, or any of the knives in the Steelcraft series. Now, this is a foggy line, and it's my own specific definition of where we start to get higher and higher qualities of manufacturing. You can see there we're definitely at a different point between the Spyderco Man X2 and the 3/4 Quaken. Everything's finished, more in a more premium way. There's a lot more attention to detail. You've got contouring on the scales. You've got carbon fiber inlays, things like that. It's not necessarily how exotic the materials are. It's how everything's done. There's more detail in it. So this is a foggy line, but definitely at the tippy top of ultra high-end production, and arguably Midtech, would be a knife like the Rick Hinderer XM18. Now, this is where a lot of different people start to have a lot of different opinions about this. If you go by Ken Onion's definition, where some of the pieces are, machine made and some of them are hand done, then, you could classify it as Midtech. The way that I understand Rick Hinderer does his knives is everything is machine cut. The blades on his standard production knives are not hand ground, but they're hand sharpened, and then they are hand assembled and hand tuned. So some people view them as ultra high-end production, or what I would call a Tier 3 production knife. Some people classify them as Midtech. I don't know that it really matters. I don't care how you guys classify it as. It's somewhere between my own specific definition of Tier 3 high-end production and Midtech. But your Strider knives, or Strider kind of changed back to a custom knife maker, but what used to be Strider's production knives and Chris Reeve, knives like the Sebenza and the Nkosi, Umnumzan, those are all right there. Could be classified as the highest point of production or Midtech. Something that the start of what I would definitely classify as Midtech would be like Medford's knives. There's definitely some hand grinding that goes into that. As far as like a lot of the Medfords that are coming out, he does have some production knives, like the production Praetorian, where they're all kind of the same. But a knife like the Slim Midi Marauder, you can see here that we've got extra unique work that goes into it. Not something that is identical between any of the knives. You might see the same type of finish, but you won't see the same type of anodizing. You won't see the exact same pattern. That's indicative of there being a unique process with the knife. So you still have what Ken Onion is describing as part of the pieces being cut, by machine, and then there's some hand processes in there. Now, Medford has his own definition of that. I think he calls it hand tech. You can check the website. We're in an area where the definition that's set by Ken Onion is specific to his own, circumstance, right? But it applies to a wide range of knives. But this is where the argument starts to come from, because not every situation is exactly the same between all these makers. There's more or less handwork that goes into each of an individual Midtech from each individual maker. So you can classify this however you want. Some people might look at the term Handtech and assume it's better than a standard Midtech. It really is just Medford saying, I have my own way of doing this. Another example of a Midtech knife would be like the ADV Tack Butcher. That's definitely a knife that has more than a standard production process going into it. And then I've got another example, the Red Horse Knives Chopper. Again, a great example of a Midtech knife. One where some of the pieces are machined and some of them, some of the pieces have some handwork that goes into them. So this is kind of right there in the realm of, what a lot of people see. And I think a lot of these knives serve as great examples for what I'm trying to talk about. I'm kind of moving these over here because I want you guys to be able to get a good look at what I'm talking about, but I still have more knives to show. And again, keep in mind, if some of your favorite knives or some of your favorite brands are on the table and I'm not classifying the way that you want to classify them, that's all right. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just trying to kind of shed light on some of this. Now, a knife that does actually create somewhat of a foggy situation is like the Olamic Classic Wayfarer. Now, they have a specifically defined Midtech version of the Wayfarer, which is the 247. But you get up into the Wayfarer Classic and you really start to have an issue. The Wayfarer knives, or how Olamic does stuff, is definitely, there's a lot more involved. And some of this, could be said about Medford knives too, or even the ADV knives or the Red Horse knives. They have more standard, more plain Jane versions of their knives that are kind of cookie cutter, but then they also offer insane custom services as far as the finish on the blade. If you want to put a mirror polish on a Olamic Wayfarer blade, they'll do that for you. That's a lot of handwork. If you want some specific sculpting on the handle scales, you can do that, but that's a lot more handwork. So, at base, you could say the most basic version of a Wayfarer has some mid-techy elements to it, but it also absolutely has some custom elements to it, and we're crossing into the line where, there was a big argument a while back as far as what constitutes custom. A lot of people define custom as 100% handmade, everything. The blade is handmade, the scales are handmade, the screws are handmade, and then it's all assembled. A lot of people will not define, will say that a custom is nothing but that. I don't know exactly where the line is, but I can tell you that as far as Midtech goes, it starts around here, and then there's more and more and more customization, and in some circumstances, less and less and less machine work involved. Take a knife that we haven't actually talked about on this channel yet. This is the ADV Custom Tanto. Now, I would imagine, given the shape of the handle here, you can see when compared to his Tack Butcher, we're looking at roughly the same silhouette of handle, which means I would imagine that, the base form of this handle scale might be cut by machine. But then you have some obviously custom elements of the knife, like the pivot collar and the pivot itself. Completely different than what you see on the Midtech version of it. You also have these bizarre inserts. I mean, that's extra machining, and then you've got to have this cut, and then the anodized screws and things. I mean, there's a lot of extra process that goes into it. This is a totally different pocket clip. You're looking at some, obviously, this knife took a lot longer to make than that one. But I don't think it was 100% handmade. I believe that the blade was probably hand ground completely. I believe that, definitely a lot of hand processing and handwork went into some of these custom parts. This one also seems to be a lot smoother, which leads me to believe there was a lot of just additional polishing that went into it. That's what I would consider to be a custom knife. If you guys want to know, I don't specifically define custom as a knife that was 100% handmade. I respect a knife maker's ability to make a knife 100%, that's handmade. And I think that, it's a lot more common to see 100% handmade knives in fixed blades, because It's a lot easier to grind the shape of the blade and then make the handle, you know. But when you're talking about folding knives, you're talking about a pivot and, you know, a lot more hardware. And so, you know, that gets incredibly expensive. That's part of the reason why folding knives are, you know, generally a lot more expensive than fixed blades. If someone were to, and there are makers out there who actually do make everything, and it gets it gets insanely expensive. You got, you know, I'm sure there's some people who are more kind of tool knife guys, and they get on sites like Arizona Customs and they see these knives, like, and they're like $8,000 for a folding knife or $10,000 for a folding knife. Well, it can't cut that much better than a regular. No, it probably doesn't cut that much better than a folding knife. But at that, I mean, once you're into that caliber, honestly, once you're above like $1,000, 99% of people spending above $1,000 are not trying to buy a tool. They're trying to buy a conversation piece or an art piece or something that has a story behind it, or something that has, you know, human craft in it, something that's partially or completely handmade, you know. And the final tier, the most expensive knife that I actually have here is the Marfion Custom Warhound, which is, again, I imagine the blade's hand ground. You know, there's an enormous amount of handwork that goes into this knife, but I would also imagine there's some machine work that goes into it. I don't own a knife or have a knife on loan to me that actually is 100% handmade. But we're getting up into this area where the knife is more and more expensive. So you're like, well, what am I paying for if it's not 100% handmade? You're definitely paying in part some, you know, especially like if you're talking about Marfion knives, which are made really, really well. You're paying in part for the maker's name. You know, it's kind of like driving a Mercedes or a Cadillac or a Rolls Royce. You know, you get that logo on there, the Marfion Custom logo or the sigil or whatever you want to call it. Part of it is that it's the prestige, it's the exclusivity of ownership of the knife, and then you're also paying, of course, for him to hand ground the blade and to assemble the knife and fine tune the knife. But some of those pieces in this case here are definitely machine made. So, you know, I wish that I had a full custom fixed blade to show you guys, you know, what a completely handmade knife looks like, but I just don't. I do think I want to tell you guys what I think. I don't think it's really important to get all that hung up on whether or not a knife that is classified as custom is actually 100% handmade. I think what matters is the fact that somebody, you know, a maker took the time to, you know, craft what they consider to be a perfect cutting tool. You know, they took their thoughts and ideas and their emotions and they put it into this object, this cutting catalyst. And, you know, they put their time and effort into it. And if you appreciate the quality of that maker, you appreciate the object, the final product, then, you know, you and maybe just a few other people who also appreciate that are going to see the value in it. You know, I think people get way too hung up on high-end production, mid-tech, custom, semi-custom, custom tech, hand tech, whatever. I think that's nonsense. I mean, you get up into here, you get up into this caliber, nobody's ever going to agree on anything, and it doesn't matter. Anybody who's willing to pay, there's no reason to listen to people's opinions who have no interest in paying this much money for a knife. People, I never pay that, you know, customs defined as this or mid-tech. Listen, if they're not the type of person who's going to pay for a knife like that, then it doesn't matter what they say. If you're interested in the knife, don't get hung up on whether or not the scales are, you know, cut by water jet or CNC or whatever. You know, if you see the value in it and that knife, and you feel like that maker would make you happy or has made you happy in the past, then, you know, you pay what you think you need to. If you think the asking price is, in, you know, where it should be, then that's fine. Now, I got a little bit preachy there, but I kind of wanted to just help, you know, explain some of those things. And like I said, go read the Blade Forms post about the original definition of Midtech. That should help out a lot of you, especially newcomers, and it should help make some things clear. But this is, just to finish this video off, this is a foggy area. It will always be a foggy area. It will always cause arguments. There's nothing to be said about it. But anyways, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed it or you at least found it entertaining, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.